The lights in the cantina were dim and yellow. Smoke from a dozen different alien pipes filled the air. Commander Vexthul sat in the corner booth, his forearms wrapped around a glass of green liquid. His compound eyes looked tired and old, even though he was only 43 cycles old for his species. The young reporter sat across from him. Her name was Ziltha, and she worked for the Galactic News Network. She had heard stories about the human war, but most of them were jokes. Everyone knew humans were weak. They had small bodies, only 2 arms, and they died easily. The war had lasted only 3 years, and humans had lost. She wanted to interview a veteran to write a funny story about how easy the war had been. So, "Commander," she said, turning on her recording device, "tell me about fighting the humans. I heard they ran away a lot." Vexthul looked at her for a long moment. His 4 hands began to shake. He took a long drink from his glass and set it down hard on the table. "You want to know about humans?" he said. His voice was rough and quiet. "You think they were easy to fight?" "Well, yes," Ziltha said. "They lost the war. They must have been weak." Vexthul laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Weak? Child, let me tell you something about humans. I was there at New Denver. I saw what they could do." Ziltha leaned forward. This was getting interesting. New Denver was a small mining colony, Vexthul continued. "We knew humans were there, but we thought it would be easy. Our intel said there were maybe 200 human soldiers. We brought 3,000 troops. We had plasma rifles, energy shields, and hover tanks. The humans had old chemical weapons and mining tools." He paused and took another drink. "We landed on a Tuesday morning. The human base was built into the side of a mountain. It looked small and weak. Our general, Kexmore, said we would be done by lunch. He ordered a direct assault." Vexthul's eyes grew distant as he remembered. The first wave went in with 500 soldiers. They marched straight toward the human base. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then the mountain exploded. "What do you mean?" Ziltha asked. "The humans had rigged the whole mountainside with mining charges. They waited until our troops were right underneath. Then they blew up half the mountain. Rocks the size of buildings came crashing down. We lost 200 soldiers in the first 5 minutes." Ziltha's eyes went wide. She had never heard this part of the story. But that was just the beginning. Vexthul said. The humans had turned their mining equipment into weapons. They had drilling machines that could punch through our energy shields. They had conveyor belts that moved their soldiers through tunnels we could not see. They had turned their whole colony into one big weapon. He rubbed his forehead with one of his hands. "We tried to surround them, but they had dug tunnels everywhere. Our soldiers would be walking along and suddenly humans would pop up from the ground behind them. They would attack and then disappear back into the tunnels before we could respond." "How long did this go on?" Ziltha asked. 6 days, Vexthul said. 6 days of the worst fighting I have ever seen. Every time we thought we had them cornered, they would do something impossible. On the 3rd day, they collapsed an entire tunnel system just to stop 50 of our soldiers from advancing. They buried themselves in the process, but they took our troops with them. He paused and stared into his drink. Their commander was a human named Jake Morrison. We intercepted his communication sometimes. Even after we shot off his left arm with plasma fire, he kept giving orders to his troops. He never asked for help. He never talked about surrender. He just kept fighting. "What happened to him?" Ziltha asked. "On the 6th day, we finally broke through their main defenses. Morrison was there, bleeding and barely able to stand. He had a simple chemical rifle in his remaining hand. Do you know what he said when he saw us?" Ziltha shook her head. "He said, 'You boys picked the wrong planet.' Then he started shooting. He killed 12 of our soldiers before we could stop him. Even with one arm and half dead from blood loss, he kept fighting until the very end." Vexthul finished his drink and signaled for another one. "After the battle, we found something in the human base that changed everything for me. It was a message Morrison had recorded for his family back on Earth. He knew he was going to die. He knew his soldiers were going to die. But in the message, he did not sound scared or sad. He sounded proud. What did he say? He said, 'Tell my children that their father died fighting for something that mattered. Tell them that we held the line. Tell them that we made the aliens pay for every inch of ground." Then he smiled and said, "And tell them that this is just the beginning." Vexthul's new drink arrived, and he took a large gulp. That was when I realized we were not fighting a normal species. Most civilized races fight for territory or resources. They surrender when the cost becomes too high. But humans fight for ideas. They fight for concepts that most of us cannot even understand. And they will die for those ideas. Without hesitation, he looked directly at Ziltha. New Denver was supposed to be an easy victory. Instead, we lost 800 soldiers taking a base defended by 200 humans. And that was just the first battle. Every fight after that got worse. The reporter sat in stunned silence. This was not the story she had expected to hear. "Do you want to know about Luna Base?" Vexthul asked. "Or should I tell you about Earth's orbital platforms? Because, child, if you think New Denver was bad, you have no idea what humans are really capable of when they get angry." Ziltha ordered another drink for herself. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held her recording device. The story about New Denver was nothing like what she had expected to hear. She looked at Commander Vexthul, who was staring into his glass with those tired compound eyes. "You mentioned Luna Base," she said quietly. "What happened there?" Vexthul let out a long breath. Luna Base was different. It was humanity's first real military base off their home planet. Big place built into their moon. Our command thought it would be easy to take. After all, we had 12 battlecruisers and 40,000 troops. The humans had maybe 5,000 soldiers on that base. He took another drink. We surrounded the moon completely. No ships could get in or out. No supplies could reach them. Our Admiral Thexkar announced over the communication channels that the humans had 1 hour to surrender. If they gave up, we would treat them well. If they fought, we would show no mercy. What did they say? Nothing. Complete silence for 59 minutes. Then, exactly 1 minute before the deadline, we got a message. It was from their base commander, General Lisa Rodriguez. All she said was, "Come and take it." Vexthul paused and rubbed his forehead again. "We started bombing the base from orbit. For 3 days straight, we hit them with everything we had. Plasma bombardment, kinetic strikes, fusion warheads. When the smoke cleared, half the base was gone. We were sure nothing could have survived. But they did survive? Oh yes, they survived. When our landing forces went down, the humans were waiting for them. They had dug deeper into the moon than we thought possible. They had turned the whole inside of the base into a maze of tunnels and rooms. Every corridor was a trap. Vexthul's voice grew quieter. The humans had taken apart their own equipment to make weapons. They turned kitchen knives into spears. They made bombs from cleaning supplies. They rigged doors to explode when we opened them. They used their own furniture to block hallways and force us into kill zones. How long did the siege last? 3 months. 3 months of the most brutal fighting I have ever seen. Every day we lost more soldiers. Every night the humans would attack our positions and disappear back into their tunnels. They knew every inch of that base. We were fighting blind. He finished his drink and signaled for another one. Their second in command was Colonel Pete Harrison. We captured some of their communications during the siege. This man was coordinating attacks all over the base using nothing but hand signals and written notes. When we destroyed their communication systems, they went back to methods that were thousands of years old. What about supplies? They must have been running out of food and water. Vexthul laughed that bitter laugh again. That is what we thought too. We knew they could not have much food left. Our intelligence said they would surrender within a week when they got hungry enough. He shook his head. We were wrong. When we finally captured some of their positions, we found out what they were eating. Recycled water, vitamin pills, paste made from algae they were growing in the dark. They had been living on practically nothing for months, and they were still fighting. Like demons. The new drink arrived and Vexthul took a long gulp. The worst part was their morale. Most species break down mentally during a long siege. They get depressed, scared, hopeless. Not humans. The longer we fought them, the angrier they got. They started leaving messages for us written in their own blood on the walls. Things like, "Earth remembers" and "You will pay for this." How did it end? Vexthul was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. On the 91st day, we finally broke through their main defenses. We had lost 22,000 troops, but we had them cornered in the central command center. Admiral Thexkar was furious. He wanted to make an example of them. He ordered the final assault personally. He paused and drank again. When our troops reached the command center, they found Commander Kate Sullivan sitting at the main control console. She was badly wounded, missing her right leg from a plasma blast, but she was still alive, still conscious. She looked up at our soldiers and smiled. What did she do? She had rigged the entire base to explode, not just the command center, the whole base. All the ammunition, all the fuel, all the power generators, everything. She had turned Luna Base into one giant bomb. Ziltha felt cold. Did she detonate it? She looked at our troops and said, "See you in hell." Then she pressed the button. The explosion was so massive that it destroyed half of our landing force. We lost another 15,000 soldiers in 1 second. Vexthul stared into his drink. But that was not the worst part. Before she died, Sullivan transmitted a message to every human base in the system. She told them exactly how long we had held out. She told them how many of us she had killed. She told them that Luna Base had fallen. But the price had been paid, in blood. What happened after that? Every human base in the system started fighting harder. They had heard Sullivan's message. They knew that their people could hold out for 3 months against impossible odds. They knew that even in defeat, humans could make their enemies pay a terrible price. Vexthul looked up at Ziltha with those tired eyes. That was when I started to understand what we were really fighting. These were not soldiers in the normal sense. These were people who had decided that dying on their feet was better than living on their knees. And they all believed it completely. Ziltha noticed that other aliens in the cantina had stopped talking. They were listening to Vexthul's story, their faces showing fear and disbelief. The commander did not seem to notice. His 4 hands were gripping his glass so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. "There is one battle that broke me," Vexthul said suddenly. "The attack on Earth's orbital defense platforms. That was where I learned what humans were really made of." He emptied his glass in one gulp and immediately ordered another. The platforms were huge. Each one was like a small city floating in space around Earth. We had studied them for months. Our scientists said they would be controlled by computers and robots like most civilized species use. We expected maybe a few hundred technicians on each platform. But that was not what you found? No. When we got close enough to scan properly, we found thousands of humans on each platform. Engineers, technicians, soldiers, even some civilians. They were operating everything manually. Every weapon, every shield generator, every communication system had humans controlling it directly. Vexthul's new drink arrived and he took a large swallow. I was assigned to the assault on Platform 7. It was one of the biggest ones with enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. Our battle group had 8 ships and 15,000 Marines. We were confident we could take it quickly. What went wrong? Everything. The humans had been preparing for this attack for weeks. They knew we were coming. When we got within range, they opened fire with everything they had, but it was not random shooting. Every shot was precisely aimed. Every weapon was coordinated perfectly. He paused and stared at the table. We found out later that they were using hand signals to coordinate their attacks. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster was running the whole defense using nothing but gestures and written notes. When we destroyed their communication arrays, she just kept going. She had her people memorize attack patterns and timing sequences. How did they manage that? Training. Endless training. These humans had practiced working together until they could operate as one mind. When one person fell, another took their place immediately. When a weapon was damaged, they fixed it with spare parts and tools. When the spare parts ran out, they made new ones from scrap metal. Vexthul took another drink. The worst part was their dedication. We hit the platform's main reactor with a direct plasma strike. The entire power core was damaged and leaking radiation. Any sane species would have evacuated immediately. The radiation levels were deadly, but the humans stayed. One man did, Chief Engineer Rick Davis. He volunteered to go into the reactor compartment and reroute the power manually. He knew the radiation would kill him. Everyone knew it. But the weapons systems needed power and someone had to do the job. Vexthol's voice became very quiet. We intercepted his final communications. He was talking to his wife back on Earth. He told her he loved her. He told her to take care of their children. He told her he was proud to die defending his home. Then he crawled into those radioactive tunnels and got the job done. How long did he survive? 2 days. For 2 days, he kept those weapons online while the radiation slowly killed him. He would check in every few hours to report on the power levels. His voice got weaker each time, but he never complained. He never asked to be relieved. He just did his job until he died. Ziltha felt sick. She had never heard of such behavior. That was when I realized we were not fighting soldiers, Vexthul continued. We were fighting something else entirely. Most species fight for money or territory or resources, things they can touch and measure. But humans fight for ideas that exist only in their minds. What kind of ideas? Freedom, honor, the right to make their own choices. They would rather die than give up these things. And they do not just believe in them individually. Their whole society believes in them. Every human we fought was willing to die for concepts that most of us cannot even understand. Vexthul rubbed his eyes with 2 of his hands. We offered them surrender terms, good terms. We would have let them live. We would have given them food, shelter, medical care. All they had to do was stop fighting and accept our rule. Do you know what their government said? What? They said no. Not just no, but hell no. They said they would rather die free than live as slaves. And they meant it. Every single one of them meant it. He drank again. Platform 7 held out for 18 days. 18 days of constant fighting. When we finally broke through their defenses, we found something that will haunt me forever. The humans had prepared a final message for us. It was written on the wall of the command center in their own blood. What did it say? It said, "You can kill us, but you cannot break us. Our children will remember what you did here. They will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy. This is not over. This will never be over." Vexthul finished his drink and sat back in his chair. That was when I started having nightmares. Not about the fighting or the dying. About the hatred in their eyes. These humans did not just want to win the war. They wanted to make us pay for starting it. They wanted revenge that would last for generations. Did that scare your commanders? It should have. But they did not understand what we were dealing with. They thought humans were just being dramatic. They thought we could break their spirit with enough pressure. They were wrong. The more pressure we applied, the harder humans fought back. He looked at Ziltha with those tired compound eyes. Do you want to know about their counterattack? Because that is when things got really terrifying. The cantina had become completely silent. Even the bartender had stopped cleaning glasses and was listening to Vexthul's story. The commander's 4 hands were shaking so badly now that he could barely hold his drink. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. The human counterattack began 6 months after we destroyed their orbital platforms. By then, we had pushed them back to their home solar system. Our fleet controlled all the space around Earth. We thought we had won. We thought they were finished. Ziltha leaned forward. But they were not? No. They were just getting started. The first sign of trouble came when our long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching from the outer planets. At first, we thought it was reinforcements from another human colony. Then we got a closer look. Vexthul took a shaky sip of his drink. It was not a military fleet. It was everything. Cargo ships, passenger liners, mining vessels, even pleasure craft. Thousands of ships of every size and type. They had armed them all. Weapons bolted to hulls, missile tubes welded to cargo bays, plasma cannons mounted on civilian transports. They turned their entire civilian fleet into warships. Yes, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was how they used them. Admiral Chris Murphy was commanding the human fleet. We intercepted his orders to his captains. He told them they were not expected to return home. He told them their job was to hurt us as much as possible before they died. Vexthul paused and stared into his drink. The first attack came at dawn. A human cargo ship loaded with nuclear warheads rammed our flagship at near light speed. The explosion was visible from 3 planets away. We lost 8,000 crew members in 1 second. They used their own ships as weapons? Over and over again. Every time we destroyed one of their military vessels, they would repair it just enough to fly and send it back at us as a guided missile. When they ran out of military ships, they started using civilian ones. Passenger liners full of explosives. Mining ships rigged to detonate. Even small personal craft loaded with whatever bombs they could find. He finished his drink and immediately ordered another. Commodore Helen Carter was leading their fighter squadrons. We monitored her communications during the battles. She was telling her pilots to ignore their own safety completely. Their only job was to damage our ships before they were shot down. She called it acceptable losses. How many pilots did they lose? All of them. Every single fighter pilot in the human fleet died in the first week of fighting. But they took out 37 of our cruisers and damaged dozens more. Each pilot killed an average of 40 coalition soldiers before they died. Vexthul's new drink arrived, and he drank half of it immediately. But the thing that really broke our morale was what they did with their dead. Most civilized species treat their fallen with respect. They bury them or burn them or send them into space with ceremony. Humans did something different. What did they do? They weaponized their own corpses. They would load the bodies of dead soldiers into cargo pods and fire them at our ships. But they attached messages to the bodies, messages that said things like, "We will never stop coming," and "Our deaths will be avenged," and "This is what happens to those who fight Earth." Ziltha felt sick to her stomach. The psychological effect was devastating. Our soldiers started breaking down. They were not just fighting an enemy. They were fighting a species that had turned death itself into a weapon. Every time we won a battle, more human ships would appear. Every time we killed their soldiers, they would send us their bodies as a promise of more violence to come. Vexthul rubbed his forehead with 2 hands. The final phase began when Captain Tony Miller led what they called the Last Stand Squadron. 50 damaged human fighters, barely able to fly, loaded with every explosive they could find. Miller transmitted a message to our entire fleet before the attack. He said, "You wanted a war with humanity. Now you have one. We hope you enjoy it." What happened to them? They attacked our command ship directly, not trying to disable it or capture it. They just wanted to destroy it completely. Miller's fighter was hit by plasma fire and lost its left wing. Any sane pilot would have ejected. Instead, he used his damaged ship to ram our bridge tower. Vexthul's voice was getting quieter and quieter. Commander Beth Rogers coordinated simultaneous suicide attacks all across our battle line. She had organized every remaining human ship into kamikaze units. They did not try to win battles in the traditional sense. They just tried to hurt us as much as possible before they died. Did it work? Too well. We were winning every battle, but we were losing the war. For every human ship we destroyed, they would build 3 more from scrap metal. For every human soldier we killed, 10 more would volunteer to take their place. Their whole civilization had become a weapon pointed at us. He finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. That was when I realized the truth. We were not fighting a military force. We were fighting an entire species that had decided death was better than defeat. Every man, woman, and child on Earth was ready to die fighting us, and they were prepared to keep fighting for generations. Ziltha could barely speak. How did it end? That is what I will tell you next, because the ending is the most terrifying part of all. The entire cantina was silent now. Even the music had stopped playing. Every alien in the place was staring at Commander Vexthul, waiting for him to finish his story. The old warrior's 4 hands were wrapped around his empty glass, and his compound eyes were fixed on something far away. "You want to know how it ended?" he said finally. "You want to know why we stopped fighting? I will tell you, but you will not like the answer." Ziltha could barely breathe. Her recording device was still running, capturing every word. "The truth is, we won every major battle. We destroyed their fleets, we took their bases, we controlled all the space around their planet. By every military measure, we had achieved total victory, but we had not won the war. He signaled for another drink with a shaking hand. The problem was simple. For every human we killed, more appeared to take their place. They were not just recruiting soldiers from their military. They were turning their entire population into fighters. Children, elderly, people, civilians who had never held a weapon in their lives, all of them were preparing to fight us. How do you know this? Our intelligence intercepted their civilian communications. What we found terrified our command staff more than any battle report. We heard broadcasts of 12-year-old children learning to use explosives. We saw videos of grandparents practicing with combat rifles. We monitored planning sessions where mayors and governors were organizing resistance cells. Vexthul's new drink arrived, and he drank it like medicine. Mayor Frank Collins of New Chicago was teaching civilians how to make bombs from household chemicals. Governor Sandra White of the Texas sector was coordinating underground bunkers that could hide fighters for decades. These were not military leaders. These were ordinary people who had decided that freedom was worth dying for. What did your commanders think about this? At first, they thought it was propaganda. No civilized species would use children and elderly people as soldiers. It violated every rule of warfare that we understood. But the evidence kept piling up. Every human settlement we captured had weapons hidden everywhere. Every human civilian we interrogated talked about continuing the fight no matter what happened. He paused and stared into his drink. That was when Admiral Korthval called for a strategy meeting. All the senior commanders gathered to discuss our options. The meeting lasted 3 days. At the end, we reached a conclusion that changed everything. What conclusion? We could win the war, but only if we killed every single human in existence. Not just the soldiers, not just the military leaders. Every man, woman, and child on Earth and every human colony in space. Complete genocide was the only way to stop them from fighting. Ziltha felt cold. What did you decide? Admiral Korthval put it to a vote. He asked if we were prepared to exterminate an entire species to end the war. The vote was close, but the majority said no. We were soldiers, not murderers. We had families of our own. We could not bring ourselves to kill billions of innocent people, even if they were prepared to fight us. Vexthul finished his drink and set the glass down carefully. But there was another problem. Even if we had decided on genocide, it would not have solved our real issue. By that time, humans had spread to dozens of star systems. They had colonies, trading posts, and settlements scattered across half the galaxy. Even if we destroyed Earth, millions of humans would survive, and they would want revenge. More than want it, they would live for it. We had intercepted enough human communications to understand their psychology. If we destroyed their homeworld, the surviving humans would spend the rest of eternity hunting down every coalition citizen they could find. Our children would never be safe. Our grandchildren would never be safe. For generations, humans would be seeking vengeance. He looked up at Ziltha with those tired, haunted eyes. Do you understand what that means? We were not just fighting a war. We were fighting a species that had decided to make hatred of us their primary purpose in life. Every human child would be raised to hate us. Every human adult would spend their days planning our destruction. They would never stop, never forgive, never forget. So what did you do? We did the only logical thing. We offered them a peace treaty. Not surrender terms, not occupation. A real peace treaty that recognized humans as equals. We withdrew from all human territory. We paid them compensation for the damage we had caused. We promised never to attack them again. Ziltha could not believe what she was hearing. You gave them everything they wanted? We gave them what they were willing to die for, the right to exist as a free and independent species, and in return they agreed to stop trying to kill us all. Vexthul signaled for one more drink. The peace treaty was signed 15 years ago. Since then, humans have become one of the most respected species in the galaxy. They are excellent traders, skilled engineers, and surprisingly good diplomats. But every coalition citizen knows the truth about them. What truth? That they are the most dangerous species in known space. Not because of their technology or their weapons, but because of their psychology. They do not fight to win. They fight to ensure that their enemies never feel safe again. They turn war into a permanent condition that lasts for generations. He received his final drink and held it without drinking. So when people ask me about the human war, I tell them this: we did not lose because humans were stronger than us. We lost because they were willing to make their entire species into a weapon. They were prepared to sacrifice everything, including their own lives and the lives of their children, to make us pay for attacking them. Vexthul looked directly at Ziltha. Never go to war with humans, child, because they do not fight battles, they fight forever, and they never ever forget. He drank his final glass and stood up slowly. Now you know why I have nightmares.